Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. It's the long weekend. It's, the last long weekend of summer. And then, it's the funny thing is like I'm the exact opposite of everybody else. Everybody like bemoans the ending of summer. And I'm like, I can't wait for fall to be here and hockey to be here. It's like I'm anxious to go to training camps and watch hockey games, whereas everybody else is like, they want to go on vacation and go sunbathing or whatever.
I mean, look, I'm not a sunbather, but you're nuts. I mean, I even have a birthday next month. I can wait. September's a good month. Don't let it rush. It's fine.
We got into a little bit of a discussion off, on Twitter, off the air, regarding John Candy, who's one of our favorite comedic actors. And I just brought up as a pre-show thing to discuss what our favorite John Candy movies were. And then I'll start off with this. John Candy has the uncanny ability that even in a support role or in a just like a minimal role, he makes the movie. It's like anybody remembers not Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but I mean Home Alone. Mm-hmm. He was the polka guy with Catherine O'Hara trying to get back to her son. And just they know each other from SCTV. The little byplay going back and forth was hilarious. And another movie, Volunteers, which is a bad Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah. Oh,
but it was a really bad. But he was like
Tom Tuttle from Tacoma, Washington.
Yeah, he was like the only funny thing in that movie, and that's pretty bad to say.
Yeah,
but
anything he was in, he definitely like you said, like in Vacation. You remember the Wally World stuff we all did. Yeah. But Uncle Buck, I felt like was his best. Or at least my
Uncle
favorite.
Buck was good.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, when I just looked it up recently, I didn't realize that was a John Hughes movie. I was so used to, I was so used to the Brat Pack movies that was a little different. And that year was what, 1989. So I don't know if Macaulay Culkin didn't really make it till the next year, but he was really good in that movie. Yeah. I don't think we knew who Macaulay Culkin was in that movie.
Like I think that was his first or second. He was like 7 years old in that.
I know.
And that movie was a little darker too for a John Hughes movie in certain ways. Like there's a weird side to it.
Well, but, it wasn't so much it was dark. There was like this snarkiness that came from the daughter. But flipping the giant pancake was great. The discussion at the beginning with John Candy and Macaulay Culkin, like, hey, where do you live, in an apartment? Are you single? Are you married? That stuff was just unbelievable for a 7-year-old to even pull off.
Oh yeah.
And John Candy probably could do that scene 15 times with a whole bunch of ad libs. It was just great. Like, that's just a fun movie. It was, before Mr. Mom and all those others,
But my favorite scene in that movie is when he goes into the school and he can't take the eye off the mole on the lady's face.
And he actually said he was Mr. Melanoma. And then he said something about the wart by mistake. Yeah, it was great.
But the movie that brought up this conversation more than anything was The Great Outdoors, which the funny thing is like that movie was sort of under the radar. And I think we've talked about it before. The funny, nobody remembers that the wife of Dan Aykroyd in that movie was Annette Bening. And this was before her big break with The Grifters and Bugsy with her eventual husband, Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
She was sort of like a side player in that movie, but all you have to say is one phrase: the old 96er.
Yeah, the old 96er gets everybody.
Yeah. So
I know. I mean, the problem with I love The Great Outdoors, and that's why I said it was on last night in our chat, and the problem with The Great Outdoors for a John Candy movie is John Candy's fine in it, but it's really Dan Aykroyd as Uncle Roman who carries that movie because he's got all the quotes.
Sure. Well, John Candy didn't always have to carry a movie. He could just be like the second best or the surprisingly great part about it.
Yeah. John Candy, he appeared in a lot of movies and different things. JFK, the Blues Brothers, Orange Whip, 3 Orange Whips. Little things. He had these funny little pieces here and there, and he could pull things off really well that way. Stripes. And that's what was interesting about it. And there's a whole generation of people who will never understand what SCTV was like and the nuances and Johnny LaRue and then the Count. Remember what was the Count's name? He played the Count. I mean, there is just some
every episode, but I saw them after the fact because in New York City, I don't remember SCTV being shown until later on like Channel 13, PBS, and so that it took me a while to catch on to that.
Yeah, and he did an imitation. Remember, that show was based in Toronto in the late 70s.
Right.
So I believe it was him that did an imitation of Harold Ballard. And it was a derogatory. Believe me, it was not a flattering.
Actually, he did. I remember seeing it online.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I would say now an underrated, and this is the funny thing is like when John Candy is a comedic performer, you don't associate him with like romantic comedies, but one movie that I thought was pretty good was called Only the Lonely, where his romantic interest was Ali Sheedy, where she was like an embalmer or worked in a funeral home. You had to suspend disbelief that Ali Sheedy could be interested in John Candy, but anything is possible. So, but honestly, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is just, that's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah,
it's a good movie. I never saw it more than once, but I do remember, enjoying it. And I do remember there being a lot of buzz about it.
Yeah.
Don't
forget he was in Cool Runnings too.
And that was the funny thing.
Runnings, I'll be honest.
That's the funny thing is like I almost got it was a Disney movie, and I almost got the feeling he was trying to be like, remember he's the coach that disgraced he was a disgraced guy for Team USA back in the day, and this was his means of redemption. There was this sort of serious line in the story, and I just never really bought it. I know that it was a highly there was a Jamaican bobsled team, but it was really highly not edited, but you know what I'm saying.
Here's some other parts that we forget. Brewster's Millions, he was a catcher in that. Delirious, I remember Delirious. See, that's
Oh, is that the one?
He was in Stripes too with
yeah. Still Delirious with Emma Sam.
Summer Rental. He was good in Summer Rental.
Yeah, Summer Rental. My wife loves
that. Was that a Cusack movie?
No, it wasn't Cusack.
Oh no. I'm thinking. I know what I'm thinking of. Okay, yeah, no, Summer Rental. I remember that.
I'm thinking that's Chevy Chase, but let me look it up.
No, Candy was the main guy in Summer Rental. I was thinking of there was a John Cusack summer movie with Demi Moore that
he was the main guy in it. You're right. Yeah.
Anyway, let me just touch on this because from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Wait, we got one more. Spaceballs. We forgot Spaceballs.
Oh yeah, Spaceballs.
Yeah,
that's it. Now I'm done.
Yeah, no, and the funny thing is, I think one of his worst movies was one of his last movies. If you remember Wagons East with Matthew Perry, it was just terrible.
I didn't see it.
Yeah. And the last movie he's credited for is one called Canadian Bacon.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a Michael Moore movie, so I won't go any further on that. Now, talking about ridiculous statements, and this guy Jalen Ramsey of the Jacksonville Jaguars, every time he opens his freaking mouth, it's a ridiculous statement. He comes out. He apparently followed up a interview with a magazine where he basically ripped almost every quarterback in the NFL with an interview in ESPN, the magazine, where he stated, where he is quoted as saying he has never tried skating, but if he trained for 6 months, he could probably crack the NHL. Shut up, please. I mean, these guys are gifted athletes, but even one of the most gifted athletes in Michael Jordan, who was probably the best basketball player of all time, was a .220 hitter in Double-A. So if you want to make your impression on the public by making ridiculous statements, keep doing it, but don't insult people in the NHL by saying you could pick it up in 6 months and be able to play at the NHL level. You're just an idiot if you say stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can do that. I mean, look, Tom Glavine got drafted into both leagues. Tom Glavine would have probably found out that he wasn't good enough for the NHL. One of the guys, I am working on a book now that I'm going to have Kirk McCaskill in, and he's one that happened to do both really well. Like he was great in Winnipeg.
Yeah,
and he was a really good pitcher. Like he scored 20 goals, I think, for Winnipeg, and he won 15 games. In the AHL.
In the AHL, okay. I didn't know. I know he didn't play in the NHL, but I knew he was a hockey player, and he was a really good starting pitcher for the Angels. So, yeah. Okay. All right, let's get started, guys. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, August 31st, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen of Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, we had some news last night. And, you know, there are a number of restricted free agents still unsigned, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But one that just came off the board was defenseman Noah Hanifin, who signed a 6-year deal for just under $5 million per season. Hanifin was acquired as part of that big – it was five-player deal between Carolina and Calgary. Michael Ferland, Dougie Hamilton, and Adam Fox going to Carolina. Hanifin and Elias Lindholm going to the Flames. Russ, I've long liked Hanifin. I think he's a very good NHL defenseman. This is, I think, a really good contract in terms of term and amount for the Flames.
Well, I think until the next potential work stoppage, I think players are stopping at signing those 8-year deals unless the team really pushes for it and really gives them a high price tag. If a team's giving you what you would say like a mid-range good price tag, players are stopping at 6 years because they know they can get another kick at the can. And so you look at Hanifin and you say that last year was his best year. He had 32 points, 10 goals. The 10 goals is sustainable. I think he can get up to 40 points. But I don't think he's got much more than that. I think it's the other things in his game where he's a really good skater. He can be physical at times. Could he be better in his own end? Yeah. Yeah, I think he has to improve in his own end. And I think that's what dropped the price tag a little bit. Because like people are like, well, you know, Josh Morrissey and Ivan Provorov. And it's like, yeah, but you're talking about this is a different kind of guy. They're all different in their own ways. But this guy's got a little bit of size to him. And so with the size, with the scoring, that's where he's really getting this salary from. I don't think it's like a bargain because everybody's like, oh, it's a bargain. It's not a bargain. I mean, he's really, 21 years old, 4th year in the league. So it's not a bargain.
Well, I'll say it this way, and Peter, you can comment on this. I use the tool on Cap Friendly to use a comparable in terms of the Hanifin deal compared to other deals that have been signed recently. And, Brady Shea from the Rangers signed a 6-year deal at $5.25 million. I think Hanifin's Shea has had one really good year. And Hanifin's, I think, has had 2. And they're around the same age. I think Shea's 3 years older. So, maybe that's the reason why he got a little more than Hanifin did. But, down the line, Dmitry Orlov, 5.1 for 6 years. Yeah. Hampus Lindholm, 5.25 for 6 years. Shane Gostisbehere, 4.5 for 6 years. Seth Jones, 5.4. I mean, I think he's among those in terms of, quality of player, and he got a little less than most of them.
You know what it is about Shea? You got to remember, anytime you're negotiating with the New York Rangers, you're going to get a little more. That's just the way it is. Players don't come cheap to the Rangers. It's very rare. Shattenkirk is that rare one. So they always have to overpay a little bit. Also, that said, the Rangers were pretty horrible last year, so you can't really count last year on what Brady Shea did.
No, Peter, I want your thoughts on the contract, but I also want, in terms of, an interested party to this is probably the Winnipeg Jets with Josh Morrissey as an RFA. Well, what did you think of the deal, and what do you think?
I think it's fair. I think Morrissey could probably command more. I think he's a better all-around player than Hanifin, as he is right now. Not by much, but just in different capacities. I think, Hanifin scores a little more on the goal front. One thing that was, this is a bit of an oversight. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but there's a special clause in this contract. You got an NMC, a no museum clause.
Oh, God.
I wish I could take credit for that. That was a tweet I saw last night. I thought that was very clever. I can't remember who tweeted that out, but they deserve all the credit. Anyways, I think it's a smart move. And given what Trey Living's done, you know what? I mean, if it doesn't work, he's not going to be around to deal with it. So it's sort of a no lose for him, because if it doesn't work, he'll be gone, and that's fine. So, for a team like the Jets, who has to think about Josh Morrissey, is 6 years the number of for term, and then do you fiddle around with the salary point? And is this an indication that this is what's available and what's market value or in and around that? Because, one of the things when discussing the Hanifin thing that I saw came up in my Twitter mentions was, is this a fair deal for Morrissey if you'd matched it? And most people came back and say the Brady Shea one was probably a little more realistic for Morrissey in terms of what's fair. And I think that's probably accurate. And if that's the case, what's Morrissey betting on? Well, he's betting on two things. One, they want a bridge deal because they think he's going to have a better option, and they want to go 8 years after the bridge deal. So given the way the lockout works, it would be this year and next season. So you would be back to when, and I'll go back to Evander Kane, is right before the lockout. He literally signed his deal the day before the lockout happened. And there was a bunch of deals, if you remember correctly, in the fall of 2012, started coming down the pipe in September before it officially happened. Right. Guys getting their deals in beforehand. And I wonder if that's the thinking too, is you get your bridge deal and then you lock in for 7-8 years right before the lockout happens, when everyone's a little panicky about what could happen, because you're not going to change the terms of contracts. In terms of, you're not going to roll back the term on existing contracts. You just may change the way the cap recapture works or whatever. So, those things. So that's what I'm curious of his agent is. I mean, this is just a funny one to me, because if the team wanted to go long-term, why would you not just make them pay more for the UFA years or front load it with this year for like a huge signing bonus this year when they have some cap space?
See, I think
I just don't. I'm missing something in this.
I'll give you two things that I think play into this.
Okay.
One is, hey, down the line, he still might be angling to get to the Bruins someday. So maybe 6 years is one reason. And B, he's getting paid in Canadian funds.
No. All
American contract.
Yeah.
All American.
They're all American.
All NHL contracts are U.S. funds.
They are all American. Okay.
Well,
then I would think it's the Massachusetts thing, like where somewhere late in his career, he won't be that late. It'd be 20. Be 27.
I think that's
angling to get there.
I think that's the biggest point, because you've seen it play out with star players like Stamkos and Tavares and Kane and Taves. And I think that's going to be the norm right now. I think it has less to do with the uncertainty of the CBA and more to do with the fact that these players can get two big paydays. Hanifin is 21. He gets 6 years at almost $5 million. When the contract is over, he's 27 years old. That's still pretty young. If you're 29, like a James Van Riemsdyk, you have to take a 5-year deal because teams are not going to pay into your mid-30s. Whereas if you're 27, I don't think many teams are going to have a problem offering 7 or even 8. So I think that's what that might be the dilemma that happens with guys like other restricted free agents and the big guys like Tyler Seguin or Austin Matthews coming up next year, is that teams probably want to get them locked up for 8. And they probably want less so they can get another big payday. So I think it's a little of both. I think the teams want to save on the cap space, and they also don't want to buy out the unrestricted years. If he signed an 8-year deal, it would have been 4 unrestricted years that you're buying out, and that's a lot. And that's going to cost you a ton. Now, one thing or a couple things here, Calgary related. I mean, Giordano was signed up for another 4 years. This is a 6-year deal. So now Hanifin is locked up. Their other 3 defensemen, TJ Brody, Hamonic, and Michael Stone, all 2 years left on their deals. So they don't have a lot of long-term things tied up on their blue line. And Russ, that they have some youngsters coming up. So they have some flexibility. They might be, if things don't work out this year, or if some of their young guys are ready to come up, they have some flexibility with guys like Hamonic or Brody that they might be willing to trade them because they have young guys ready to take their spots.
Yeah, like Oliver Shillington's if he doesn't make the team, will be going into his third year with Stockton, and I would expect that that's the way it'll go. He's only 21. He had 35 points last year. I think, for the few issues that were sort of uncovered after he was drafted, he's starting to really do well and come along. Yusuf Alamaki, we just watched a couple of days ago. I think he's pretty close. He might be 2 years close. So you look at Valimaki and you say, all right, I mean, no offense to TJ Brody, but if Valimaki's there, TJ Brody probably doesn't need to be there at that point. I mean, Valimaki had 14 goals last year. He had 19 the year before. He only played 43 games, yet he had 45 points. So, and I've seen him in international play. He's terrific. So, you talk about just those two guys, that's enough to give you a little bit of leeway. And then, that's what I think they're looking at. I think they're looking at that and they say, all right, you know what? We do have some guys that are close. And I think actually this is really good roster management. And Rasmus Anderson's the other one, right? Like I don't know exactly where he'll fall in, but the fact that, I could name 3 young guys and they've got these guys on 2-year deals,
right?
That's good roster management. You could tell now that at some point there's going to be another shift in the way they pay this defensive unit.
Yeah, there's a lot of favorable talk about Anderson that I've heard about over the last year. And I mean, I don't know what that means in terms of when he's going to be ready for the NHL or if he's going to be as a trade piece. But all I'm saying is that Brad Treliving has got a lot of flexibility when it comes to his blue line because he has 5 established guys. And if there's somebody playing in the AHL who is ready, they have the freedom to be able to move one of those guys. And we know how valuable experienced defensemen are on the trade market. And then be able to bring up somebody internally and save yourself some money and get some either prospects or get something back in an area where you need help. So I think this is a good contract for Calgary, and we'll see. They were a disappointing team last year, so we'll see. Where they end up.
I think the moves that they've made will definitely help them. If they don't make the playoffs this year, then something's really wrong.
Yeah, and Bill Peters should have a positive effect on that team. Now, in terms of restricted free agents, we're down to 12 unsigned RFAs. Panafin was the most recent one. The ones I think everybody is focusing on, Sam Reinhart in Buffalo, William Nylander in Toronto, to a lesser extent, Nick Ritchie in Anaheim, Darnell Nurse in Edmonton is a big one, Shea Theodore at Morrissey. Those are the big 5 or 6. The thing is, Peter, I don't know whether as we get closer to the opening of training camp, which most of them open on the 13th or 14th of September, whether that means we're closer to bridge deals or it's sort of a staring contest where, the team is looking for that long-term deal and it's a difference of a few $100,000 one way or the other.
You know what? I don't have a crystal ball on this at all. And you have to wonder, and is it just simply about the idea of term, 2 years versus 6 or 5 or longer? I mean, is that what's the holdup, or is it the dollar value at either level? I mean, it just seems weird that for the ones that are still sitting there, like a Josh Morrissey, you just don't have a deal. Like, why? What's the point in being in this situation? And that's what I don't understand.
I think, Peter, now that Hanafin's done, you'll see movement on Morrissey, Theodore, and Nurse. I think everybody knew this deal was coming, so teams want to see what it's going to be before they offer, and I think that's exactly what they were doing.
Let me ask a question about this. I've written about this a number of times with the Jets over the years, and that I have often thought that the Jets sit back, or Kevin Cheveldayoff sits back, and he's prepared to let the market set the price. Rather than be in the forefront and try and set the price, set the value himself. And one thing, negotiations are a really funny thing, whether it's a contractor or anything that you're doing, and take out professional sports. Do you want to establish the value to you, or do you want someone else to establish what the market value is that you're forced to pay? Which way? I mean, I don't know. I know which way I prefer, but I don't know if it's the right way. It's just what I prefer. And I'd rather be establishing the value to me and what a player is, or what a contract I'm negotiating for anything is, versus having the market determine what I have to pay.
Yeah, I think I think right now, like Nurse has the most bargaining power, and Morrissey's got the least. I think when you're talking about these guys, and I think Theodore is somewhere in between because he can't go too crazy because there's Eric Brandstrom lurking, and that's certainly, if he prices himself out, he's only going to get 2 years, so he's got to watch it.
Well, Russ, I think there's a unique situation playing out in Vegas because you have Theodore, who's an RFA right now. You have Nate Schmidt, who's a UFA next year. And it could be a situation where, even though Vegas has got a lot of money, it's like one of those situations where you play one against the other and say, okay, whoever makes the first deal gets the money, and whoever doesn't, I
think Schmidt's important to him, but
so do I.
But McPhee knows there's a limit for him based on age, where the other guys there isn't. So I think you have to get Theodore locked up first if you're going to. If they look at Brandstrom and say, hey, you know what? Brandstrom's coming next year. Let's just wait. Let's give Theodore his 2-year bridge, and we'll worry about it later. Because to be honest, we've got to lock up Schmidt. He's a veteran here. He's been very important. They can bring in Brandstrom. Maybe Theodore's not even in the picture in 3 years. It is possible.
No,
they have a lot of guys.
I get the feeling, and it's not based on any kind of any like inside source that I had, but just based on how Sam Reinhart's career has gone in Buffalo. And I like him as a player, and he had a really good second half last year. I have a feeling that it's going to be a bridge deal because I think Buffalo wants to see, wants a little more proof before they invest long-term. And they've got a lot of long-term money invested in guys like Opozo. So I don't think they're ready to take the plunge on Reinhart just yet. Nylander, and we've talked about this off and on. I know that a lot of people in Toronto right now are starting to get a little nervous about the deal not being made yet, and they're 2 weeks out of training camp right now. I've heard it said that it's possible that the Leafs have some sort of agreement in principle with either him or Matthews, and they're waiting to get the other agreed to a deal, and then they announce them both at the same time to sort of avoid that McDavid Draisaitl using one as leverage against the other type of thing. And I think that's possible. But what I look at, and I know that general managers do this, Peter, is they use comparables. Yeah. And William Nylander, he was drafted one pick ahead of Nikolai Ehlers, and Ehlers took his deal last year, got 7 years at $6 million per. They put up similar totals. Now David Pastrnak, who was drafted lower in that 2014 draft, he's making closer to $7 million. So you would think on a 6 or 7 year deal, that's the range that William Nylander is and his representatives are probably looking for. And that, I don't know how much of a problem that is, because not only Matthews but Marner, they have to get signed too, and that's a lot of money to invest in forwards.
Yeah. This is a really tricky dance that's going on. And I just when you're talking about that, you sort of forget, and I'm trying to pull up the 2014 draft just to remember, because I forgot what Pastrnak had taken. And so
he was like 21 or 22 in the first round. Again,
there was a lot of mystery about Pastrnak, what he might be in the NHL, and that's why Boston.
But he's still, he's at 6.66, like 22 years old. Ehlers is at 6. Nylander and Marner are going to be they're going to be 6.
At least.
That's a given.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think with Nylander, it would be really weird to announce Nylander signing and then announce Matthews or Marner or as an extension, that they're all done at the same time. So, these come up, because I think it's just too much to go on without anyone knowing what it's going to be. Like, word seeps out amongst agents, and guys are trying to figure out, agents talk, this is going to be really tricky. And to our earlier point was, when it comes up next year, so say Matthews and Marner enter the season as they currently are, Nylander gets his deal. Mm-hmm. The reason you probably want to extend Marner at the same time as Nylander, try and get them at similar deals, is because what if Marner really lights it up this year because he's getting time with like these things.
And Peter, that's why Marner's not going to sign an extension. I mean, from all the indications that I've picked up over the last few months, it sounds like they are going to try to get Matthews done either before the season starts or early in the season because the Leafs are not stupid. They're going to pay him, probably $11.5 million, like in that range, the same amount as Tavares, close to McDavid, because they think that, and I think they're right in thinking that Matthews is going to be or already is a star player. Yeah. Nylander is slotted where we were just talking. The sort of random element here is Marner, because for what you just said, if Marner plays with Tavares, I mean, we've heard no talk of any kind of deal being close with Marner. And if he goes into his final year and puts up 90 points, he's going to expect to make, $8 million, $8.5 million, like Draisaitl money. And that's where I think
he won't make that.
I don't think, Marner isn't Draisaitl. He's wicked. He's talented, but he's not Draisaitl.
Draisaitl also has the size. The one thing that you're not mentioning with all these guys, even though Nylander's 6 feet, he's not an imposing guy when he plays. Pasternak's 6 feet, but he will go in the middle. Like Pasternak will do things Nylander won't in a game. And those guys have been paid for that. I think ultimately the Leafs give a 2-year bridge deal to Nylander simply because they don't know what Marner is going to do. And then if you look at the two players, and this is no slight at Nylander, he's a heck of a player, but Marner has special capabilities. We always knew that. It was just a matter of, hey, could he withstand the punishment of the NHL? Clearly he can. So now when you look at the two players, Marner's the one who's got more upside than Nylander. That's just the way it is.
And this is go ahead, Pierre.
I was going to say, and here's just to follow up with why Marner doesn't want to sign a contract, because the depth of the forwards in the Leafs right now is so ridiculous. And he wants to play this year because you know what? If you had to sign Marner now, you're going to add inflation. So he might get Ehlers money, but he's not producing like Ehlers does.
No.
And goals and points. He's 15 points lower a season in the 2 pro years. So, give and take.
Marner.
And it's not a slight at Marner. It's just more of where the Leafs are. So now you add in Tavares, you upset the apple cart of talent, meaning you're running Tavares, Matthews, Kadri down the middle. And we all know what Kadri, an unsung hero in terms of driving play and what guys can do with them. You throw Marner in any of those combinations now, and we all know what some of the frustrations Leafs fans had with some of Babcock's combinations last year due to depth. Now, of course, this is what happens. He needs this deal to make sure he's going to get 6+. It's 6 now because that's just what it's going to be.
You know what it is, though.
And now anything he does after this season is just adding to the base of 6.
I mean, here's the other thing too, Peter. I agree with that. Marner early on in his career, because of the way the Leafs were, got a lot more opportunity than Ehlers did early in his career as far as power play and minutes and everything. Because I remember Ehlers' first year, he wasn't getting a ton of minutes, and he was producing even without that. Marner's had all of that. Like, they've given him everything. Not every young player does. So I think if Ehlers would have had all those opportunities, he'd have been making more money now.
I mean, Marner more than likely, because remember on their top power play this last season, it was Kadri, Marner, Riley, and then JVR and Bozak, and they're both gone. More than likely, Tavares is going to be on that first unit power play. I don't know who the replacement for JVR would be. I don't think it's going to be Matthews. I think Matthews is going to end up still being on the second power play, which is a nice luxury to have. But my point being is that Marner is
I don't think he'll be on the second power play much longer.
Russ, I don't. They have to have a second power play unit that provides offense. If you put Marner or if you put Matthews and Tavares on the top power play, I don't see it.
I mean, they have enough players to create a second power play that'll be really good. There is no need to continue to put Austin Matthews on the second one when he can produce more on the top one when he's going to get more ice time. Like, why am I limiting his power play time? That just seems stupid.
But the what you were saying is regarding the bridge deal, they probably save on a 2-year deal between $2 to $2.5 million over the next 2 years each year in terms of cap room. He's probably going to get 4 to 4.5 on a 2-year bridge deal, and a 6 or 7 year deal would be 6.5 to 7. So that money, especially in the 2 years where they're going to potentially be competing for a Stanley Cup and looking to add players, that 2.5 to 2 to 2.5 million, it could be valuable.
Here's the
so what's the logic of giving? So if you look at just production, I'm not going to get into any other metrics, just point production. Nylander's a better player than Marner. Point production as a professional. Just
argument, but okay.
I'm just saying, as I'm taking one thing. Hold on.
Marner is slightly ahead. Marner was, I think, a point or two behind Nylander 2 years ago. Marner was ahead of Nylander last year in the regular season, and
regular season, Nylander had 61 points in his last 2 seasons.
Yeah,
and in his last 2 seasons, playing 81 and 82 games.
And Marner had 60 and 68 or 60 and 69.
No, I don't think. Did he?
He had. Yeah, he was on par. He was on par with Nylander.
I may have looked at the wrong column when I said something earlier. Okay, Marner was 6. Sorry, I looked at the wrong column. 61 and 69. Okay, sorry, I was looking at the wrong. My mistake. So I was talking about Ehlers earlier. Yeah, they matched. He's excused. So that's my goofiness. So if you have to get rid of one of them, let's just play this game. So say in the conversations in the Leafs head office, Kyle Dubas and his team are sitting there, and Shanahan says, you have to make a choice at some point. We're going to be forced to make a choice at some point around this. Why are you going one way or the other? And they play out the arguments. Mm-hmm. Is it better to extend Nylander because you can do it right now and go all in on him, and then bridge Marner? Because we're talking about bridging Nylander and coming back to Marner. Like, does it make sense to do it the other way? And is, or better yet, let me rephrase that question. Is there an argument to do it the other way, of bridging Marner and getting Nylander all the way in?
Well, I don't know about that, but what I do know is that if you're talking about making a decision between one or the other down the line, I think they will push that decision as far away as they possibly can. Whether that means they sign Nylander to do a bridge deal and then possibly trade him after the 2 years, depending on, depending on what he does in those 2 years. If his point totals go up and his value goes up, and that it's going to be a PK Subban situation where he's going to be looking for $7.5 to $8 million after the 2 years, then I don't think they can afford to sign Nylander off of a bridge deal.
Here's the thing, though.
What if they bridge them both?
I mean, they could, but I don't think there's an advantage to that.
I don't. Well, the being is they say we have 2 years to get this done.
Yeah, and then
we know we have to make a change.
Right.
Then
they know that they're going to have to choose one over the other.
I think that's not the ideal way. But here's something I want to point out, because also, and maybe for the Leaf fans, it's not like Marner doesn't have a way to go. He does, because that first year for Ehlers, like, he had 15 power play points, whereas like last year he had 29, right? Mm-hmm. But Ehlers also has like 11 game-winning goals. He had 29 goals last year. And Ehlers is a better player today than Mitch Marner. And Mitch Marner just gets more press than Nikolai Ehlers. If you watch Ehlers like Peter watches Ehlers, I think he'll even tell you that he is a more dangerous player than Marner.
Well,
if Ehlers was playing in Vancouver, where they could have had him instead of taking Jake Virtanen, or Toronto, the level of press he would get would be astounding.
Right.
True. But I'll just say this about Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner, and I'm including Austin Matthews in this, was the Leafs' best player from January through the playoffs. He had a terrible first 40 games. I think he was in single digits. I think he had 3 goals. He had assists, but he wasn't scoring. Second half of the year, he found himself. He started scoring more. He was they had him on a line with Marleau and Kadri for most of the second half. He was great in the power play, and then in the playoffs, the struggles of Matthews were well chronicled, and by extension Nylander, because Nylander was on Matthews' line and then got taken off of the line when he wasn't succeeding. Marner was on the second line with Marleau, and those were the 2 best Leaf forwards. So I think Marner is ahead of Nylander, And I think eventually, if they both sign long-term deals, I think Marner's going to get more than Nylander. But that's the whole thing. This is going to be very interesting to see over the next 12 months where these things go. And as I've said in numerous columns, whatever they end up paying these guys, it just means that they're not going to be able to sign Jake Gardiner, because if Jake Gardiner has another big year, they're not going to be able to afford him. So anyway,
I do want to answer something too. BK here said, you should listen to the Bruins coach during the playoffs, praise Marner as the most deadly offensive-driven player on the Leafs. Yeah, that's all well and good. But again, that coach only sees Nikolai Ehlers play twice a year.
Right.
And if he saw him in the playoffs, he might have a different opinion too. That's what I'm basically saying here. A lot of people still don't know how good Ehlers is, and it's astounding to me.
And I also think that the fact that Ehlers did not play well in the playoffs last year is a mark against him. But I'm sorry, Marner was a disappearing act in the playoffs 2 years ago, and it was because of injury, and he had mono and a few other things. But I mean, he was a fiend last year. So I mean, you have to take those things into consideration.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, the one interesting thing when you look at the comparison of those two, this is where I like Marner more, is when Ehlers needs the open space. He needs to wind it up a bit. And the problem he has is he's wonderful to watch. Like, he can get the puck from point A to point B and get it in the zone and stuff. Where he has a little bit of trouble, where Marner is simply dazzling, is tight space.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what, like, Ehlers can get in there. He can do some great turns and stuff, but Marner's moves with the stick and everything are just
no question,
outrageous. I mean, you can't develop that skill.
But straight line speed, Ehlers is faster, like on a break.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And you have to consider this also. And I did the last few weeks, the Leafs top 25 prospects. I think there are players within the organization like Andreas Janssen, like Jeremy Bracco, who really lit it up in the last month in the AHL when he finally got an opportunity, who conceivably within a year or two could fit into at that complementary role that Nylander is currently in with Matthews. I don't think there's anybody in the Leafs organization that can replace Mitch Marner. That it will also be a consideration going forward, is if they have to trade him, do we have somebody to replace them? And I don't think they have anybody to replace Mitch Marner, but I do think there is somebody who can replace Nylander in the current role that he's in. Okay, let's now, from what we just talked about, you can imagine that Toronto, at least on my list, is one of the top 4 forward groups in the NHL. So we won't make this a Toronto show. We'll eliminate Toronto. I assume they're in your group, Russ. I assume they're in your group, Peter. Of my group, the other team is Winnipeg. I think their forward group is the best in the West, without question. Now, they're going to face a number of decisions over the next 12 months. Wheeler, contracts for Line, contracts for Kyle Connor. But right now, going into the season, I think they're the best forward group in the West. Russ?
Yeah, I think so too.
And Peter.
I mean, I think no slight at the Preds. They've got a very solid group in the West. I think the problem is they, if Kyle Turris was more than he is, you could say they were even deeper, because I think, that's the problem. I think the Jets, though, with their forward group, are going to have to readjust a few things, because I don't think they're going to. I think they're aware of this, but until you have to live life without him, the addition of Paul Stastny was a huge thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing, though. I don't have the Preds in my list. So in the West, I do think it's Winnipeg, but I have the St. Louis Blues as the is it fourth or fifth? 1, 2, 3, 4 as the fifth. And because you're right, Mike, somebody said fifth somewhere along the line. Why I have the Blues there is they're strong up the middle. We forget about Tarasenko. I talked about their kids yesterday and Thomas. I mean, just adding Robert Thomas would be great. If they added Thomas and Cairo and they actually were ready, that would be a massive add to their lineup. They have a very talented forward group. Schwartz, we mentioned a lot of them yesterday. I just don't think it sinks in how good they are at center right now. I think people are actually going to need to see that working.
Well, like we said yesterday, I think it depends on where they have. I mean, Thomas could play center or he could play wing. Shen could play center or he could play wing. Bozak is up the middle. O'Reilly's up the middle. I don't think O'Reilly is a number one. I think he's a number two, but I think they're going to use him as a number one. But they're the depth: Schwartz, Tarasenko, Steen.
Yeah,
they're they traded two pretty good depth forwards in Sobotka and Berglund, and they're not, if Fabry comes back and they have young guys like Thomas and Cairo and Costin. I mean, the well is deep for St. Louis, no doubt.
Yeah, even the year that David Perron had last year, you got to say, we're looking for pretty good things out of him.
Although I don't think he's going to get the ice time that he did in Vegas.
No, but he's not getting 66 points, but he could get 50.
Yeah, I mean, I shied away from Nashville, but I have to say that if and Fiala had a good year last year, if Tolvanen makes a jump, I think they could jump into the top 5 because Johansson, Forsberg, Turris had an off year. Arvidsson is I think he's underrated because he's a smaller player, but he's a buzzsaw. I think the forward group is pretty good, and Hartman was a great late season ad.
Yeah. They produce. And I think part of the thing that makes, I think one of the things, I can understand why people wouldn't like them, but in the top 5, but because so much of their offense is fed by such a devastatingly good defense, right? Like what feeds up, and having that defense allows you not to have the elite talent on the offense, because all your elite talent, is your defense is so packed with elite talent. The other team that is, I think should be a dark horse in forwards though, is if they do put it together this year, is Calgary. There is a ton of talent on that team.
A lot of talent there. I agree.
If Peters can bring this together, Calgary could make some noise this year, and it could be very interesting to watch.
I'll tell you this. Here's how I ranked them. And I think it's important because I have Tampa 1, Toronto 2, Washington 3. Washington and Winnipeg, I think Winnipeg looks sexier, but Washington still gets the job done. So they're arguable. Like, they're in a dead heat. And then I have St. Louis. Like, people forget about Washington. Like, Washington's still in my list. I almost put Pittsburgh in, but I said I think they lost too much.
See, I had Pittsburgh over Washington. I think Washington is top heavy. I think their top 6 are great, but I still don't think their bottom 6 are that good. Whereas I think Pittsburgh is deep.
You're not taking into account, again, you want to talk about second half stuff and accounting for Marner. What did Jakub Vrana do for Washington's second half? He was pretty damn good.
He's pretty damn good, and Burke and Burakovsky as well. But you're talking Malkin, Crosby, Brassard as your top 3 centers. You're talking Kessel, Hornquist, Hagelin, Rust, Jake Gensel. That's really, that's deep, and that's won cups. I know that the Capitals have won 1, but I like Pittsburgh still over Washington.
Like the 1's not that good. Like,
no, hey, I'm sure Leaf fans would take that 1 in the last 51 years, but
that's what I'm saying. It's like they've won 1, but they do look again. Here's the thing: are we going to just count the talent for the forwards based on goals, or are we going to give Tom Wilson some credit for giving his other guys some space and being a threat to keep the other guys away so they can do their job? Like, that's a big.
You mean Tom Wilson, the guy who's working with the Department of Player Safety to not get suspended this year?
Yeah, but look who they have. They're not the biggest names, but you have Backstrom, who, again, the way you name all these other names, it's like Backstrom seems like an afterthought.
I think they're top 6. Backstrom and Kuznetsov up the middle, Ovechkin, Oshie. I think their top 6 are great. I just don't think their bottom 6 are that good, and I think Pittsburgh's deeper.
I don't think so. I think again, when you see what Vrana can fully do, I even was like completely shocked and happy at what Devontae Smith-Pelly was able to do, especially in the playoffs. Like, in the playoffs, he was really good, and he wasn't good every game, but he had some big games, and like, that's another sort of role player that we probably all looked at and said,
And to me, it's Tampa and Toronto 1-2, and you can argue over which one but
I agree.
Tampa right now, and the rich just get richer. Braden Point had a good rookie season 2 years ago and then broke out last year. I think eventually, his ascendancy is going to end up causing like Tyler Johnson to get traded. But right now Johnson's there, Palat, Miller, Johnson, Kucherov, Killorn. They're three lines offensively deep. And
look, Adam Ernie might crack the lineup this year. He played a fair amount until he got hurt last year. He might crack the lineup this year.
But yeah, so I
he's had a great shot.
Yeah, funny thing is the team that I think a lot of people a year or two ago would have included in the top forward groups that now I think that people really would, I think they would say no. And we haven't mentioned Edmonton. I think the reason Edmonton is not getting mentioned is because it's three guys, and then after that it takes a big drop.
We're getting ripped for not mentioning Arizona either, but it's like Arizona's like in that next.
They haven't proven themselves yet.
Yeah, they haven't proven it. They do have names, young names that are sort of unproven talent that I like and I trumpet. But
nobody's a bigger Clayton Keller fan than Russ. If Dylan Strome steps up, if Galchenyuk scores 30 goals, don't get me wrong, there's a ton of talent there, but they haven't proven it yet.
Right.
And it's more than just potential. No, the team I was talking about was Anaheim. And I think people realize now Kessler is injury prone. Getzlaf is in the final chapter. He's not ready to retire, but he's in the second chapter of his career. Perry, I think, is almost done.
Yeah,
and thank God those guys have 3 more years at a combined almost $17 million for the two of them.
Enjoy that.
Yeah,
but I don't think anybody's ranking them in the top 5 forward groups.
No, I agree with that.
Russ, do we have any questions in the chat? Anything?
Let's see. If anybody has questions, shoot them up now. I know there were some early on. Hold on.
Yeah, while you're looking, I'll just bring up the fact that it was interesting that Lars Eller, who was a former teammate of Max Pacioretty in Montreal, and a good friend, he went to social media yesterday and says, as a friend, I hope Max Pacioretty's situation gets resolved soon. He has shouldered one of the toughest jobs in hockey, wearing the C for the Habs, taking responsibility and blame for things beyond his control, which that's a shot across the bow to coaching and management. At the same time, being one of the top goal scorers in the game. He is as committed and cares as much as anyone I've ever played with. Any team would be lucky to have him.
No, it's great. And Eller's a good guy, and that does carry some weight, believe me. I do think in a week, Pacioretty's gone. So first question was from Toronto Greenhouse. I kind of wonder about the name. Is it because Toronto has the greenhouse effect, or is it something else? Did he grow up in a greenhouse? I don't know. Or
could it be that green is associated with a certain smoking? It is going to be legal there in a few months.
So the question was, how much dollars in terms does Brock Besser get in Vancouver? And I think they'll offer him 8 years if he has another good year this year, but I don't know if he'll take it. Like, I think it's going to be one of those situations where you might see a 6-year deal for him too, because if he goes and scores another 30, 35 goals, they're going to have to pay him at least $6 million a year.
Yeah. If he puts up similar totals to last year, he's at the starting point is Pasternak's deal.
Yeah.
So it'll be almost $7 million, but they have a ton of cap space.
Yeah.
They have a ton of cap space.
They do, but again, that's just a situation where his agent might say, hey, look, in 6 years, you might be one of the top 10 best players in the league.
Yeah, and over
the pace he did his rookie year, which we don't know if he will, but he could make that argument.
And over $15 million is dropping off their cap at the end of this year with Derek Dorsett, Edler, Delzato, and Anders Nielsen. So the money is opening up. I think there's not going to be any question. He gets basically what he wants if he puts up.
I guess we were also asked about the that's not even worth bringing up. Sorry.
Okay.
It's just not.
Were they asking for our favorite Matthew Perry movies or something?
They were not. I don't know if there is a favorite Matthew Perry movie. I don't think he's done one.
The whole 9 yards is pretty good.
But I did see Matthew Perry a couple of years ago at the outdoor game. He was
he's a big Ottawa Senators fan, so I can't like him that much.
Yeah, I saw him in Detroit. I saw him for when they had the game at Comerica. They had the AHL game there. I was waiting online, and I saw Matthew Perry there. So he was taken in. So he is a big hockey fan. Let's see. What do you guys think the Blackhawks are going to do? I think dead last in their division. You guys?
Yeah, pretty close. They may surprise for a bit, but I don't see anyone. I mean, dead last might not mean they were bad. It just means they're last in a competitive division. I just don't see them.
Yeah, and if they are, see that's the thing. If they are dead last in the Central Division and they get 80, 85 points, probably Joel Quenneville is gone. And I think you're going to start to, Stan Bowman is going to start thinking of scenarios where he tries to trade off some of these players that have been around for years that were part of the Stanley Cup winning teams. It's, good luck trying to find somebody to take Brent Seabrook, but yeah. I think you could find people out there, teams that are in need of defense, I think would take Duncan Keith off of your hands.
Yeah. All right. So here's another one from Slash. I mean, if this is really Slash, I did see you once in concert. I thought you were pretty good.
Yeah, you were great on one of Lenny Kravitz's albums.
If Dallas can't reach an agreement with Seguin by trade deadline, can you see Doug Wilson making a deal for him? Sharks will have the cap space. I mean, Sharks have a lot of cap space because they cleared it for Tavares. So we could name 3 guys that they would want. I don't think Dallas will actually trade Seguin at the deadline. I think they're one of those teams, because they're going to be in it, are going to have to roll into hoping negotiations continue throughout the year and maybe get him signed at the end of the year, especially if they do really well. They're in a tough spot. I don't think they're going to trade him at the deadline, though.
Russ, our current friend and former hockey buzzer Dan Petru on Twitter was basically salivating at the prospect of Tyler Seguin coming to the Islanders next July, and I tweeted it back to him and said, "Now you sound like me last summer."
But that is a possibility. Yeah. I mean, there's no question. Would he fit in on Long Island? Absolutely. In the New York market, yes.
Sure. And
what do you guys think about the?
I don't think they're going to trade. I don't think they're going to trade him because I think Dallas is going to be in the playoff race. So I don't think they'll trade him, and I think they'll try to get him signed. But if he's going to take the Tavares stance and say, well, we'll wait until the season, and they fall out of the playoffs.
Yeah,
and they'll trade him.
Here's another one.
Then New York and Vancouver get in a bidding war.
Yeah, here's an interesting one. This is from Julian. Do we question? Do you think Clark MacArthur will pass a physical in Ottawa this year? I don't,
and I don't think he should play. Like I think this is your life. Yeah, you've been through enough. It's
Clark MacArthur has 2 years left in his contract. I hope for his sake he doesn't play another NHL game.
Yeah, here's a good one from Kyle. Russ, do you think Jordan Wheel will be the third line center for the Flyers, or will Couturier being out in the preseason help Frost get a chance? I think Frost will get a long look, and even though Hextall has been against the 9-game thing before, if Couturier, stays out and they feel like Frost is doing really well, I think, like any other GM, just because you said that's something you'll never do doesn't mean you'll never do it. And I think Frost would get at least that 9-game look, because then if you elongate that 9-game look, like you basically, you give him a game or two in the press box, you probably could eat up quite a bit of, time in that schedule before you figure it out. And look, if Frost does really well, you could go the Lucas Spiza route where they play him like 32 games and then send him back if that's the case. That is a possibility too.
They do not want to break the 40-game mark.
Correct.
They'll burn the first year of entry level, but if he goes past 40 games, that starts the clock on unrestricted free agency.
So they'll go 30-something games perhaps if he's looking that good. I think there's an outside chance. I'm not saying it's a great chance.
Well, that time frame goes along with him going to the World Junior in Vancouver. Yes. I mean, he could play for the first couple months and then they review where he is. I mean, let's just say this: he was 100 plus point center in the OHL last year. Yeah. For probably, I know that Hamilton was the team that made the Memorial Cup, but I think Sault Ste. Marie was the best team in the OHL.
All right, so here's a couple more questions. One from Kay Zacher. With all Florida's additions, what are Owen Tippett's odds to make the team out of camp by the end of the season? I think by the end of the season, there's no question but I think 90% he makes it out of camp. He almost made it the last time, and I think that it was so dangerously close. They just said, you know what, we're not quite there as a team, so why push him through that? I think now if he comes in and he looks a little better than he did last time, they're going to have a hard time getting rid of him.
I think the chances are less now that they acquired Hoffman and then they signed Brouwer. I think they did that to sort of give them a little bit of a buffer.
Yeah, but if he comes in popping in goals, like Brouwer could sit.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if he's on the top two lines playing with Trocheck or Barkov and he's scoring, then yeah, he's going to make it.
So here's another question. This is from Mark Peterson. Is there any way Duncan Keith is elite this year? I'd say no.
No.
I wouldn't say no. It's highly unlikely, but put it in this scenario. The Leafs are top 2 in the Atlantic and think they have a legitimate chance to win. The Blackhawks are definitely out of the playoffs and fully buying into the rebuild. I think that they could trade Duncan Keith, and I think Toronto, based on the fact that Babcock had him on 2 Olympic teams, would be interested in. The problem is and his contract is $5.5 million, which is a bargain compared to some other defensemen. It's just till when? 2026? Something
True.
like that.
Like 2 more. Another question from Julian. Do we think that Lou, meaning Lamoriello, will convince Sorokin to come to the NHL in 1920? I think his contract goes 1 more year past that. So we'd have to check that.
I think he signed a 2-year deal.
Yeah. So he would have to, again, go along those rules that you have to buy it out yourself, right? So we'd all depend on what Lou is going to pay him. And Lou doesn't necessarily pay you if he doesn't know you. So if 2 years means this year and next year, it might be another year till you see Sorokin. You might not see Sorokin next year because of the way that situation is.
But they did sign Leonard to a 1-year deal.
Right.
So and Grice, I think, is more of a 1A, 1B scenario than.
But if Leonard does well, like there's not going to be a rush for Sorokin, I don't think.
This year, no. But
after this year, they'll re-sign him, and I think they would just tell Sorokin, "Hey, we'll put you in the AHL," and he probably wouldn't want to do that.
Well, it all depends on what Leonard does. I mean, if Leonard thrives, then they have options. But I think Leonard was a stopgap, basically.
Yeah, and the last question was not a question. I'm going to add something. Somebody did ask about a guy from the KHL that Colorado just signed. I don't know. So I don't know if he's going to make the team. I don't know the player. So I can't comment on him. But remember, we talked about Shumakov, and the interesting thing now, did the Capitals definitely sign him? Is it all signed?
I hadn't heard I'll check, but I hadn't heard a confirmation that they did.
I haven't heard a confirmation either. And so let's see. Here's the thing, though. It's gotten to the point for him where he asked for a trade. He didn't get a trade. He hasn't trained all summer like with a team. The KHL is going on now, so whoever gets him, they're getting a guy that has to get into game shape. So even if he goes to Washington, he's going to not make it out of camp. He's going to go to Hershey. How long will he stay in Hershey? Then you get into the Shipachyov, territory where he's not going to necessarily want to ride the bus. And here's a quote that I got, and this is from and this is a really good quote. This is from Nikita Nestorov. We all remember him. They said if he's ready to go, he said if he's ready to go through the AHL, sure, Shumakov can try. So even he sort of doubts the mettle or the will that he would have to try and go through half a season or a full season of the AHL to try and really get to the NHL. So maybe that's why we haven't heard about a signing just yet.
Yeah, we all we know is that Ciska walked away. They basically they tried. He requested a trade and they couldn't find anybody, so they just released him. So that Anyway, all right. Thanks. Thank you, Peter, for coming on today. Thanks, Russ. We will not be having a show on Monday for Labor Day, so we'll be back on Tuesday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast.
It looks like, hold on, it does look like they did sign him.
Okay.
1-year contract, $925,000.
So entry level. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.